Prefontaine, and you could find me at my website, which is nickprefontaine.com. And I'm going to be sharing a lot of my experience today, my trauma from when I was growing up, when I was 14. So I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. So let's jump right into it. Let's start from the very beginning and discover what the genesis of that trauma is. So you mentioned at age 14. What is it that you went through and experienced at that age?
Sure. So terrain, I was at ski club. I was on my way to the mountain with my friends, and this mountain, it was for ski club. This mountain was, so we got dismissed a little bit early, which is always exciting as an eighth grader, to get dismissed a little bit early so we could get a jump on it. On the ride there, my friends and I had all brought our snowboard gear on the bus to get ready so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And when I was getting ready, I realized that I forgot something that I usually, not all the time, but usually brought to that mountain because it was a little bit bigger than I was used to. That's my helmet. I didn't think anything was going to happen. Nothing ever did happen. I'd be safe. I'd be careful. Everything would be fine. Got to the mountain, and because we were ready, we got ready on the bus, headed right for the chairlift. And terrain on the ride up, we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining. So people were wiping out everywhere. Needless to say, it wasn't our first time on a snowboard. My friends and we were pretty experienced, and I was just chomping at the bit. The chairlift went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And it went right over the biggest jump in the terrain park. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm hitting. That has my name all over it. So I got to the top, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. Going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow going up the jump, and that threw me off balance. And that's really the last thing that I remember. So I was told that I landed on my head. I wasn't wearing a helmet. Later, I learned I pieced together certain details of that day based on eyewitness accounts, people that were there, and my family and the doctors and everyone. So I later learned that my goggles were the only protection that my head had. They told me that I wore some pretty thick goggles with a lot of padding. They told me, Terrain, that not only did they brace my initial impact, they kept bracing my impact as I rolled down the mountain after that initial impact. So really, you can say that those goggles are part of the reason why I'm here today. And there's always three things that I like to point to, and each equally important. So they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital because of the severity of my injury, and they couldn't because it was too windy. So they sent in an ambulance, and out of the all the paramedics in the county, there was only one who could intubate on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. Once I got to the hospital, I was out for the count. They said based on the impact alone, I probably was going to be out for 7 to 10 days at a minimum. So I was resting in a coma in the intensive care unit, unable to communicate with anyone. And at least in the early days, my parents, my immediate family, were the only ones that were allowed in that room. If you can picture that, if you can imagine that. They were in my room, and it was no fault of the doctors. They just walked in the room and they started sharing. Well, here's what happened in Nick, and my mom stopped them. And up until a couple weeks ago, I used to say my parents stopped them. Then a couple weeks ago, I was on my dad's podcast, and he stopped me. He said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I love to take the credit, but it wasn't me. It was your mom." So my mom stopped them, and she said, "No, no, not in front of him." because she understood that even though I was in a coma out for the count, I was still taking in information. So they made she, not they, made the doctor step outside my room. And then once they were outside my hospital room in the ICU, that's where they shared the news with them. They said Nick's been in a serious accident, suffered a traumatic brain injury. He's in a coma, partially induced, because they didn't want the swelling in my brain, which was already at a point where it was like right up on the edge. If it increased anymore, I would die. So they didn't want me to wake up after being in a coma and freak out and be like, what are you guys doing? Who are you? How did I get here? What's happened to me? So it was a partially induced coma. They said, look, Nick's in a partially induced coma. We don't know how long he's going to be out, if he's even going to come back. And when he does come back, when and if he does come back, there's no guarantee that he's probably not going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on his own again. My parents took the information, they took in the information, just took a deep breath. And then because all of this was outside my realm, like subconsciously or like I was in a coma, so it wasn't a conscious thing, but because that information didn't even have the opportunity to get into my subconscious, my unconscious, whatever you want to call it, I was able to treat it like any other situation, like I had through my entire life up until that point. And that was once I came out of the coma, and I was in the coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month because it was a partially induced coma, as I said. So they had to slowly take me off the drugs. A month after my accident, when I got my wits about me, if you will, I just, because that information train didn't get in, I was just able to get up, keep working, keep getting better every day. And it was along this time that now remember, I couldn't walk, talk, or eat again. So this was before I could talk. However, I overheard my parents talking to my doctors and therapists, and they said, all right, what do we have to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? And I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out of the hospital. So then running out of the hospital became our common goal, what everyone was working towards. And this kind of perfectly introduces the support system that I had. So unknowingly, I was utilizing a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. That's a STEP system, and that's what I teach and speak about to this day. STEP is an acronym, and I'll give you guys a 10,000-foot view just so you get an idea. It stands for support. You have to make sure that you have the support of your family and friends around you. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. You have to trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you, and then follow it. This also has to do with following that voice in the back of your head, and your calling inside of you, which call what you want, God, the universe, the unconscious. However, I've always been able to tune in and listen to that voice in the back of my head. And later in my life, it led me to what I'm doing today, which is launching my company, Common Goal, and speaking and help out other individuals that are in the midst of their own trauma, life challenge, or crisis. So T is trust. E is energy. Energy, maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. So unbeknownst to me, and this is important, unbeknownst to me, my parents had someone come in and perform Reiki on me when I was in the coma. So they were always being proactive, and this is back in 2003. So this wasn't mainstream. However, they were always being proactive with natural therapies and treatments and things like that. And then also, with energy, we talk about the fact that medication, it interrupts the body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. So after I came out of that coma, I had a lot of drugs pumped into me to help keep me alive, and I needed that. Um, I find that especially nowadays, it's so polarizing. You're either one 100% or the other 100%, which is medical and medicine and like doctors 100%, and you don't believe in natural treatments, natural therapies, or you're 100% natural and you don't believe in any kind of medication or anything. However, I think you have success, and the reason I've had success, when you blend these two together, you need to do both of them. So I think, in the way I can illustrate this terrain, when I came out of my coma and I was starting to work and do the double sessions of physical, occupational, and speech and everything like that. This was before I got clearance to walk. So during the night, I would get up and I couldn't get anyone's attention. So I would like hobble myself over to the bathroom and go to the bathroom. And the doctors were like, well, we can't have that. And they wanted to like drug me. They were like, well, we need to give him this medication so he sleeps well at night. And my parents are like, no, just tell him not to do that. You don't have to drug him. You don't have to give him medication. So just tell him not to do that. So that's an example. I remember right around this time, very early on in my recovery, that I could overhear my parents saying to the doctors, and I decided that I was going to run out of the hospital. Right around this time, um, they were long days for me. Like I said, I had double sessions of physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So I would need help from my physical therapist to shower again, to learn how to shower again. And I mean, picture that. I had to learn that, as simple as the water comes before the soap, if you can believe that. Then I
And
started
Nick, let me
yeah.
let me ask you a question in regards to that. What you shared regarding your journey from when you had your injury up until you started to recover, it reminded me of someone I used to work with about maybe 15 years ago. This person ended up in a coma because of there was a disagreement and they got into a fight and they had a brain injury similar to yours and they're comatose. I think they were comatose, if I remember correctly, for a number of months. And they had to relearn everything as well. They had to relearn how to speak, to live their life, basically, to navigate the world. And when I had conversations with him, it was quite interesting to see that there was a sense of fear from him, not because he was scared of the world per se, but because he was afraid that the life that he remembered may not be the life that he gets to continue going forward post recovery. So for you, as you went through the S of steps, the T, the E, and then we can get to the P, was there a sense to you or a thought in your mind thinking, my life is going to be totally different after this recovery? Or were you determined to maintain your life as much as possible from what you remember before this situation?
Very interesting way you phrase that. So I really appreciate the question. I think at the time when I was going through it, I looked at everything like, so after being in a coma, and then I was only in the hospital, like inpatient rehab, the ICU, in the coma and inpatient rehab, for less than 90 days. So I looked at everything like, no, I'm fine. I'm back. There's nothing wrong. But I'm never the same. It's two different people. So the person, Nick, before my accident, and the accident and then Nick after the accident. If I were, it's two different people. And I think I was holding on a little too much. And that's part of the fact that I wanted to, like, it was a goal, it was an ideal to shoot for during my recovery, that I want to get back to, as best I can, to my life from prior to the accident. It was kind of an